Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the second season of QubaHQ Tutorials. I'm Kuba Michalski and I'm recording this intro for 80th or maybe freaking 90th time in a row. My brain is completely fried because it's so hot outside I can't really think. That's why I thought maybe it would be a good idea to do some water-based VFX today and let it rain. My first attempt at creating rain in After Effects was back in 2006 when a TV channel called Snack commissioned me to create a number of rain-themed fillers for them. We were operating on a shoestring budget and it was middle of the summer and rain was nowhere to be found, so we decided to do it in After Effects. So we took a number of photographs around the iconic locations of Istanbul, converted them into gloomy kind of rainy look in Photoshop, and then used Particular and a number of other effects to make it look as if they were seen through a window with the water coming down, and the effect looked something like this. Now, this was pretty good for 2006, but I always felt like the effect could be pushed a little bit further, and I finally got a chance to do so last year. If you follow my blog on QubaHQ.com, you probably noticed that between 2012 and 2013 I created quite a few pieces of media for a client named Olivari. There is Everything Tastes Better in Slow Motion, which is a series of cool footage shot on a high-speed phantom camera. There are Bowerbirds, which is a series of video clips for a very cool indie band. And then there are Little Things with Long Domains, which are video loops that play for around 30 minutes that reside on sites with very long domains, such as www.rain-slowly-moving-down-the-window-while-the-city-shimmers-in-the-distance.com. And most of Little Things with long domains were shot live with a red camera and then looped in post to run on a period of around 2 or 3 seconds, except for this one. So this one is a city of San Francisco at night, and I basically decided to challenge myself and try to update my rain technique and make it a bit more beautiful and a bit more believable. Once we released this piece of video to the internet, I got immediately flooded with emails requesting to tutorialize this content and explain how it's done. Now, honestly, I've been avoiding it for quite a while for one simple reason. Any tutorial attempting to explain this technique is going to be lengthy. And we're in for a fairly long ride in here, I believe. I'm not yet sure if this will end up being a single video or will I have to split it into a number of chapters. But you know what? We'll solve it once it's all recorded and I can total the amount of time that the tutorial runs for. By the way, if you look at this 18 minutes and 53 seconds, that's how long this thing has been running in the background while I've been recording newer and newer versions of this intro and fumbling over my own words. Alright, let's close this thing and get started. To make the process more manageable, I'm going to divide this tutorial into 3 chapters. In chapter 1, I'm going to show you how to prepare the background plate. So I'm going to be working with this photograph of San Francisco at night. You guys can use whatever you want, but I'm going to show you a number of tricks that we'll use to make it a bit more lively and believable. In chapter 2, we're going to create the rain simulation using Trapcode Particular. And then finally, in chapter 3, we're going to use that rain simulation to create believable distortion on top of our footage and combine everything together, throw in a few post-process effects and finalize the look of the entire composition. So while I'm not distributing any of the assets with this tutorial, I'm just going to quickly walk you through what I loaded up into After Effects and what I'm gonna be working with. Our base will be this photograph of San Francisco at night, and you can use any image you want. Night imagery will probably work best with some of the techniques I'm going to be showing you. My photograph is huge. It's over 6.5 by 5,000 pixels in size. and we're gonna scale it a lot in order to fit in our composition. It has been stitched together from a number of photos taken from a single point and then post-processed just a tiny bit in Photoshop to give it this cool bluish look. On top of that, I have 5 layers of glass dirt, which is basically a bunch of stuff that I'm gonna use to age the window a little bit. And probably I'm not gonna use the scratches themselves, but I have a handprint in here and some sort of peeling effect and another hand, and probably they will be barely visible in the final video, but it's little stuff like that that usually helps sell the effect. Alright, let's get started. Chapter 1. The background plate, or the main plate. I don't even remember what it's supposed to be called. So let's start by creating a composition, 1080p, 30 frames a second, 10 seconds in length, and just call it rain main. And I'm actually going to throw an underscore in front of it. This is something I like doing because then our project window sorts it alphabetically and brings my rain main composition to the top, so I know that's my render comp. Let's grab the San Francisco night picture and drop it right in, and I can see immediately that actually we won't need to scale it too much. It's already almost fine. I'm just going to pull the anchor point, drop it somewhere here, and scale it just a tiny bit to bring some of those buildings on the side into the view. Get a bit of the street, but this will probably suffice. And you know, this is up to your taste. There is no golden formula for it or precise number that you need to use. So this looks fine to me. I'm going to pre-compose it to continue working on it. So Ctrl-Shift-C to pre-compose, and let's call it City Shimmer. And why that name, I'll explain in a moment. So I'm going to use this plate out of focus for most of the screen real estate, and in order to do so I'll use the camera blur effect. But if I just apply camera blur, it would be a boring static image, and what I want to create is a bit of shimmer in which those bright points of lights appear and disappear softly over the course of time. So let's go back to our rain main composition and start by applying blur that we can use to evaluate how well the effect is working. So camera lens blur, double click on it, and let's push it quite a bit up. I think around 40 should do fine. It's going to take a while to render, and let me just open it up a bit and zoom in. This is probably going to be fine. Maybe we can lower it to, whoops, I resetted it, to 35 or so. Yeah, this looks much better. Now, I'm not a big fan of the hexagonal shape of aperture, so I'm just gonna switch it very quickly into heptagon. That looks much better for me. Come on, yep. And also, you can see that at the moment, we have a number of issues. One, the middle of the composition is kind of blah. Nothing interesting is happening here. There is not enough contrast on it. Also, the edges are blurring out and we get some transparency coming in from the edges. So let's try to solve it. I mean, edges are very quickly. We go to edge behavior and check in repeat edge pixels, and that's going to fill it up nicely. But in order to get rid of this kind of, well, I don't want to call it a mess, but kind of undefined color grouping, we need to add some contrast to the footage. So we can do it either inside of our city shimmer or outside. I think inside would be best. So what I can do in here is I'm going to lock in the composition rain main in our preview window, and that means I'm going to always be looking at the render of this comp, jump into city shimmer, create a new adjustment layer, new adjustment layer, and immediately name it. I mean, there's gonna be a lot of stuff going on. We want to keep it clean and tidy, so this is going to be curves, and let's search for curves in here as well. And where did I apply it? I have no idea. For some reason, probably I still had the other thing selected. Okay, delete it from here with this thing selected. I'm just gonna drag the effect. of course, after the first render, nothing changed. But if I now pull the curves just a bit down, we should start seeing some difference happening. So let's just crunch the contrast a bit, maybe even increase the amount of brightness and keep pushing it until those colors start separating really nicely. And this is starting to get there. Let's see, without it, you can see that the feel is much more homogeneous. With it, it's much stronger. Could probably push it even further. I don't want to exaggerate it too much, but this is looking pretty fine. Now, what I don't yet like about this is that all the points are exactly the same size. So, you know what? I think I pushed it a bit too much. Let's brighten it up a bit. Yeah, this is better. So all the points are the same size, and I would like to have a bit of difference between what we consider to be foreground and what's background. So if we just quickly look, where do I have the camera lens? If we quickly look at the footage, this is the front, and those objects are much closer to us, and this is the back, and they are much further. So I would like to have different amount of blur on them, and for that we need to create a very simple ramp and use it as a depth map for this effect. And you know what, the more I'm looking at it, the more I feel like I really pushed it way too hard with that color. All right, let's keep it here. We'll probably readjust it later on. So let's go back to Rain Main, unlock it, create a new solid, and this will be our depth map. Color doesn't really matter because immediately we'll apply ramp, or what it's called right now, gradient ramp. Now I gotta say, I really like what Adobe did in this version of After Effects, which is renaming the effect from ramp to gradient ramp, because a lot of people refer to it as a gradient, and it is a gradient. So having both words in the name of the effect will help a lot of people find the right plugin. Let's just revert it quickly. Push this one down, 1080, this one up. I could have just changed the colors, but it doesn't matter. So this is our simple ramp. Drop it underneath the city shimmer, and we have to pre-compose it because the camera lens blur will not read the effects from the layer. It will just read the layer as it is. So pre-compose, depth map, we don't need comp 1 on the name, and move all attributes into new composition. Now this time we don't need to open it. Let's just move it there and play with the city shimmer again. So blur map, layer, depth map. And you can see that it's starting to do that difference. And this is probably not what I want. Let's move the focal distance beyond the further buildings. This is pretty cool. And maybe push it even further. So let's try 45. This is pretty cool. Maybe I can adjust it. So you can see it's starting to look really nice. Lights closer to us are really blurred, while the ones further are much smaller. It gives us a sense of scale. What will happen if I invert it? No, this feels like the whole thing is upside down. However, I would like those to be still a bit bigger. So if I go to my depth map right now, I'm going from black, which is generating the largest blur, to white, which is generating no blur. All I need to do is make sure that our white color is a bit off-white and that it still generates blur. If we come back to main, we should see a bit of a difference right now. Yes, so we have nice blurry lights in the background and much larger ones in front. Okay, this is looking pretty good to me. Let's move on. So for the sake of staying tidy and organized, I'm going to switch off the depth map visibility. It will not affect the way our city shimmer renders, but it will just tell me, hey, you know, this is a helper layer and it does not need to be rendered. So city shimmer, if I hit 0 on the numeric keyboard to preview the video right now, there isn't really much shimmer happening, and that's because we don't really have any animation going on in that layer. So it looks good, but not good enough. Let's jump into the shimmer composition and rectify it immediately. In order to bring this image to life, we need to do something to the lights so that they start behaving like what you would see in reality. Right now it's a static image, nothing's happening, there is no action. That's where the shimmer comes in. We're going to create a new layer with fractal noise and animate the fractal noise on top of it in order to turn the lights on and off over time. Let's do that right now. So here's a new solid. Fractal noise, and same here. So if I just change this mode to multiply, you can already see the difference it's making. Some of the lights still shine through while the others are being obscured, but this is not quite enough. So let's get back to the normal mode and start animating it. Now again, there is no golden number, no formula to how it's going to work best, and I did not take notes from my previous composition, so we'll kind of have to wing it and figure it out. I'm gonna start by setting a simple expression on the evolution, so that's an alt click on the keyframe here, and the simplest of all the expressions, time, and let's multiply it by 100 right now and see what happens. So we need to let it run for maybe 2 seconds. I'm going to shorten the preview area. And let's see, this looks pretty good, but could be too fast. How about we change the transfer mode into multiply and actually verify it on the rain main composition. So I can already see that unfortunately it dimmed all the lights way too much and I have nothing strong happening anymore. So I need to come here and increase the contrast on my layer. So if I again preview it by itself, you will see that right now the dark and bright areas are becoming much more defined, so that some places will just experience a complete blackout and the others will be seen through. It looks to me like although we're at brightness 0, there is way more dark areas than bright ones. So I'm just going to push the brightness up a bit to kill off some of that black and maybe push the contrast up even more. Let's have a look at how this looks when rendered. And let me clip this one as well. I'll probably pause the recording in here so you don't have to wait for it, and see you just a moment. Okay, so it is doing what I wanted to do, but it's happening way too fast, turning the city into some sort of crazy disco party. So I can immediately see that I need to do 2 things to it. So A would be to slow it the hell down, and let's just do that very quickly. So time, let's lower it down to maybe 25, so that's 4 times slower. And the second thing, and let's isolate our fractal noise in here, would be to scale it up. Now there's just a bit too much detail happening, and it was fairly easy to read where the clouds were on the footage. So where is it in transform? I'm gonna scale it up to, let's say, 150. In addition, I can throw a simple blur on top of it. So let's go to fast blur, maybe. Yeah. And blur it just a tiny bit, something like maybe 5 pixels to soften it up. And you can see that we're immediately starting to get some nastiness around the edges again, similarly to the camera lens blur. So repeat edge pixels is on, and that sorts it right out. You know what, maybe 10 would be a better idea. Yeah, making it a bit softer. Alright, I'm gonna pause the video and re-render this to see if we succeed. Okay, so this is much better right now. We can see just enough of movement on the footage that doesn't make it totally freak out. I'll probably speed it up from 25 to 35 for the subsequent renders, but for now it's looking great, and I think we can move on to making the lens flares. Okay, so let's jump into City Shimmer, get that fractal noise adjusted to time times 35, and that should do it. And you know what, before we move on, I'm gonna switch off fractal noise for a moment. Before we move on, I feel like we could take a bit of artistic liberty with the way the city looks at the moment. So what I'm gonna do is pre-compose this once more. So that's Ctrl-Shift-S, no, Ctrl-Shift-C, and this is city plate. And again, we're moving all attributes to new composition, and that's gonna basically give us a 1080p flat image that we can use. I'm gonna make a copy of it, move it to the top here, and shift the channels a bit. So I'm applying shift channels effect to it, with the alpha being full on, taking red from its red channel, but turning off the green and the blue. And if I right now use the additive mode on this piece of footage and maybe lower the transparency to something like 70, we start getting this cool look, something like I believe Parliament cigarettes used to have back in the day, and the red dots become much more pronounced. You can see that they really glow. And let's just figure out whether this should go on top or underneath the fractal noise. Yeah, probably underneath. There we go. So if I just jump back for a second to Rain Man, you can see this is much cooler look. Let's just lock it in here and turn off that plate. This is kind of boring. This is starting to have some character and life to it. All right, this is so cool. Switch off fractal noise and get to those lens flares. And for the lens flares, of course, video copilots, optical flares, what else? Let's just load it up. Optical flares. So let's create a new solid. This is gonna be flare orange. And let's find a good lens for it. Now I'm going to be lazy. Whoa, it opened on another monitor. I'm gonna be lazy. I typically create my own flares, but for this project, just to be a bit quicker, we're gonna find something in the presets. Let's see, nothing here, and this is always taking forever. How about the lens flare of 1,000,000 commercials? This seems to be very, very popular. I think it could work. Let's try it. Switch it to additive mode. Push it to somewhere here, and I basically want to create an illusion of an orange traffic light pulsating in here. So we're gonna switch the color into orange. And the intensity is way crazy right now, so we probably can lower the scale. You know what, I'm just gonna drag it to see what it looks like. This is pretty cool. I mean, it probably has too many streaks, but we're gonna see it. And how about the brightness? 100 is about right. So why don't we put a simple expression on brightness, alt click, and go with the sine function. So we can do math sine out of time multiplied by what, let's say 4. Now this is just gonna take a bit of experimenting to figure out. Why am I not seeing anything? Because I need to multiply it by 100. So when I do math sine, the result will be oscillating between -1 and +1. And unless I multiply it by 100, it's gonna be very insignificant. Additionally, I should probably take the whole thing in parentheses and create an absolute value of it. So that's gonna be math.abs for absolute of that function. So if we preview it, let's just see in real time. This is a bit fast, so I'm gonna lower the value that we're creating it out of a bit. This is pretty cool. I think we could live with this. So this is one, and then let's make a copy of this flare. So Control D, and this is going to be called flare red, We're gonna put it on top of one of the buildings. So I'm just gonna pull it up here. Where's Transamerica? This is Transamerica. Cool. I'm gonna put it there. Let's see when is the brightness at its maximum. Around here. So this is of course way too strong. We need to scale it down. Probably to something about, let's say, 10%. And recolor it a bit. And I'm just going to sample the color from the light itself. So, or from this light. Let's grab this one and see how it looks. This is pretty cool. Alright, so of course if I turn it on right now, it's gonna look a bit weird because we're gonna have two lights pulsating at exactly the same speed, and what we want is to differentiate them. It's the same thing as when you pull on the red light and no two blinkers are perfectly synced ever. And if you find somebody who has the blinker blinking at the same frequency, grab onto them and never let go, because they are your soulmate. So let's see, where's our equation? Double tap letter U. And all we need to do is, let's say, offset that time a bit. So I'm gonna put parentheses here, add maybe 0.3 seconds and modify a speed of blinking to 1.27.6. And seriously, this is completely random, but if we preview it right now, we can clearly see that we slowed it way too much, and it just looks boring. And this shouldn't be equal, this should be plus. Let's see it right now. Okay, so now we can see that they're off sync, and it's gonna work much better. So as with everything, let's jump to rain main, make sure that our fractal noise is back on, and quickly preview it to make sure that it's not losing quality, or that everything works fine. And I figured out why the renders were taking so long, so I no longer have to cut away. I was rendering everything at full resolution, even though we're zoomed out. So as soon as I switched it to half res, we can get the previews much quicker. So this is looking pretty cool. I have a bit of a problem with this particular lens flare because it creates a weird kind of blip here on the left side. So let me see. Let me just adjust that quickly in the lens flare preferences. So let's jump here, orange flare options, and so if we're here, it's this blip we're trying to get rid of. So I think it's this one. And maybe we'll get rid of the entire multi-iris altogether. Let's see, where do we have some other settings for it? Glint and glow are on the right. This one is already off. This will eliminate some of it. Okay, all right, cool. So we kind of cleaned up the left side by modifying the preset. And yeah, this way the light is only here. Now we still have some streaks, but I think they're not gonna create too much trouble. And I can see right now that what would be really cool is two things. One, if I could boost the contrast on this flare so it's not quite so washed out. And second thing is, I think I could push the blur even a bit further. So again, back to the flares. Let's collapse this and add curves on top. And we're just gonna pull it back a bit. Make it overly darker. Yep, so that feels much more localized right now. Maybe a bit too much, but this is about right. And do we need to do anything to the other light? Probably not. I would maybe push it up to 14, just make it a bit stronger. Okay, so this is that effect, and second thing is we wanna make our blur even stronger. So let's go to 55 in here, and this is pretty good. I'll probably again change the depth map to fall off even slower. So add a bit more blur to the things in the back of the composition. Okay, this is pretty cool. You know what? No, it's not pretty cool. This building became very, very, very boring. Let's brighten it back up. Yeah, now we have more definition in there. Okay, a few more things just to make it work, and so far I've been trying to follow exactly the same procedure as with the video that I shown in the beginning, but since we're beginning to deviate with the colors, etc., why not make this video a bit cooler? So I'm looking at this flare and I still feel like it's not quite there. So what I can do with it is, again, look at this expression, and instead of multiplying it by 100, I'm gonna multiply it by 90 and then add 10 to it. And what this will do is it will make sure that it still goes all the way up to 100. Actually, you know what? I can show it to you on a graph. There we go. So it goes all the way up to 100, but falls off only to 10. So it has that minimum glow of 10. So it never fully disappears. And as I was looking at the preview on the other composition, it just felt wrong that it was disappearing completely. And the other thing is, like, there's so many different lights in here, and why do we have only one blinking? Why don't we add a few more? We have the processing power. It won't hurt us to have a bit more of a Luna Park going on. So let's just duplicate it, and now I'm gonna become messy and stop counting and naming the layers. Let's see, we can move it here, and probably we want to change that expression as well. So I'm just gonna type some random numbers. This is gonna be 8, this is gonna be, let's say, what, 7, and then I can have an exact copy of this one. Move to this light on the left, so those two will blink together in unison. And you know what, it feels like they're a bit too strong, so I'm gonna lower them to, let's say, 60, and that's because they're right next to one another, so they will kind of amplify each other. Perfect. This triangular building, perhaps there's one more here. I want to give it some verticality, so let's get back to our original flare, make a copy. Let's move it here. This is pretty good. And you know, this is gonna take a moment, so either forward the video a minute or so, or just bear with me as I type random numbers. So this is gonna be 1.3 now, 1.1 at the intensity of 70. And let's make a copy. And why is it called orange? I have no idea. Make a copy and move that copy to this corner. What else do we have? Maybe this one, and we'll be fine. So let's make one more duplicate. Pull it all the way here. There we go. Double tap U, and let's make this one a bit stronger, like 110, for example, with offset at 46 and the time of 0.9. All right, let's see. This could be a bit much or not at all. Let's see how it looks. And it doesn't look that bad in here. Looks like San Francisco is using some extremely strong lights though. But this is our true test. If it looks like crap in here, then we need to change it. If it doesn't, we're good to go. And you know what? I think I'm quite happy with how it looks. I mean, it's a bit of a Luna Park, but San Francisco is a vibrant and colorful city, and it kind of fits. So I think this concludes chapter 1. We have our backplate ready, and here is the most valuable piece of advice you're gonna hear in this tutorial. Save your projects frequently. So I'm just looking at the title bar of the window, which is out of the capture area, and you know what, I haven't saved this project even once. So maybe I'm gonna do it right now. Yep, untitled project. Let's call it 001 rain tutorial chapter 1 completed, and save it up. All right, we can move on to chapter 2.